Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call this public hearing to order. Purpose of the public hearing is to hear comments from the public regarding the tentative 2023 county budget. And at this time, I'd like to ask Mary Jo to read the notice of the public hearing.
Notice of public hearing on tentative 2023 county budget. Notice hereby giving that the Green County Legislature shall meet on 26th day of October 2022 at the Catskill High School Auditorium, 341 West Main Street, Catskill, New York, at 6 p.m. for the purpose of holding a public hearing on tentative budget, which contains the exemption impact report, real property tax law, section 495 of said county for the fiscal year February 1st, 2023. Further notice is hereby given that copies of the tentative budget, which contain the exemption impact report, real property tax law, section 495, are available at the office of the clerk of the Green County Legislature at the county office building, 411 Main Street, 4th floor, Catskill, New York, where they may be inspected, procured by any interested person during regular business hours. Pursuant to section 359 of the county law, the maximum salaries that may be fixed and payable during said fiscal year to members of the Green County Legislature and to the chairman thereof respectively are hereby specified as follows. Members of the legislature each $18,750. Chairman, Green County Legislature, $8,440. Tim Chavillo, acting clerk, Green County Legislature.
Okay, thank you, Mary Jo. And I'll now give County Administrator Sean Broden the floor for a brief PowerPoint presentation on the tentative 2023 budget.
Thank you, Chairman. This annual slideshow, sometimes you can see the information, the data on the screen. If not, there are hard copies in the audience, and I believe we have more up here at the table for anybody who does not have a hard copy. All good? All right. Traditionally, I call this page of our budget page 1. It is basically a view of total expenses and revenues. You can classify it kind of from a 30,000-foot angle. It just gives the grand totals of things. This year's budget would be $122 million and some change, as compared to last year's budget, which is about $117 million. That is probably one of the larger increases we have had year to year in a number of years. But there's two primary explanations for that I'll get into later in the presentation. Coming down in the middle of the page is the offsetting revenues. There are 6 operating funds within the county government. Synonymous, you could say, to there are 6 checkbooks, if you want to put it in that terminology. And then the bottom section, let's say 3/4 of the way down, are the fund balance contributions to the formula. And I would note the general fund contribution, which I'll get into more specifics later, is up over $1 million. On the bottom of the page, which you probably can't see, but in your hard copy you can, the levy, the amount to be raised by the property tax, remains the same 3 years, and actually this next coming year will be the 4th year in a row where there has been no increase to the property tax whatsoever. And that is the number. It's right down here at the bottom of the page. This next page is a page required by New York State. I think everybody is aware that there is a property tax cap that's been imposed by New York State on all local governments, whereby the amount of the increase to the levy cannot be higher than 2% of the rate of inflation, whichever is lower. So this is a computation that the state makes us go through if we were going to raise taxes, which we're not. But this would be the computation, and it comes over to here. It basically says if we were going to raise taxes and live within the legal limit, we could only increase the levy by $958,000, or a 3.5% increase. However, that is a 0. That is a 0 again this year. But I have to go through that exercise and certify the state every year. So that's more for edification than anything else. This next page is a little bit jumbled, not jumbled, but I apologize for the very small print. That's why you need a hard copy. So while we say that the tax levy has not gone up, and it is still 27,404, that amount is divided then over 14 towns. Each town paying a different amount based upon their taxable assessed valuation. I think everybody has understood in the last, let's say, 12, 24 months that the real estate market has been blistering hot, which will then correspond to what's called the equalization rate. I'm going to get into the weeds here a little bit, so forgive me, and I'll try to keep this as down to earth as possible. The equalization rate then changes the amount that each town has to contribute. So in the center of the page, if I can get this, see my red dot. Those are the amounts that will be raised individually by each individual town. And then again, you get down to that $27 million mark, which is again flat from year to year. Because the real estate market has been in overdrive, and many towns have not reval, what's called a reval, for the properties within their province. The numbers are being skewed. So this column here, this equalization rate, basically says that the town of Ashland is appraising property at 52% of its actual value. And that is a number determined by the state based upon actual sales that happen within each individual town versus the assessed valuation that is placed upon that property. What does that mean to you? Depending upon the town that you live in, so go to this far right-hand column, even though, again, the levy is not being increased overall to the county, it may change depending upon which of the 14 towns you reside in. And once again, this year, 8 towns will actually see a tax decrease, while 6 towns will see an increase. And all of that factor is based upon the sales and the equalization rate conversion to full value. Of the 6 towns that have an increase, 3 of them are less than 1%, but the standard deviation goes from a low of a minus 5.7 to a high of a 7.4. It's a pretty large deviation there between 2 towns, all based upon the equalization rate. Just for simple math, if your house is assessed at $100,000 and your town is a 40% equalization rate, therefore the state believes that your house is actually worth $250,000 based upon market conditions. That is really getting in the weeds. The important part of this presentation here anyways is the fact that the levy overall is not going up, but depending upon which town you live in, when you receive your January town and county tax bill, the 8 towns will see a decrease in the amount to be raised by for county services, while 6 towns will receive an increase. All of that presentation is then written here for your review. Here then is the impact, if you will, of that hot real estate market. There is a large increase in the taxable valuation from year to year, almost, I would say, an artificial increase. That is almost a 20% change in its valuation, and yet we can't say we built a chip factory or had a huge subdivision. That's all correction in market values. Doesn't change the overall value of the town or the county levy. It just goes back to the fact of which town will pay what for those services. This is an annual graph, and again, I apologize for getting too far into the weeds. Taking the budget down a little farther then, this is where I want to spend some of this stack graph, and the bottom color is blue. rounded down, of course, so my $27 million levy is for 22, the same amount for next year. And later on, you're gonna see another graph, where you're gonna see 4 years of that same change. Then you have the other revenues, that are the big one here is just every other single revenue or grant made that may come to the county for all the services that we provide. Then you have a fund balance contribution. This is where I mentioned before on page 1. So I will go back to early summer of this year when the state passed a resolution whereby counties could forego the collection of sales tax on gasoline purchases, known as the, excuse me, the gasoline holiday. Each county had the option to exercise that or a portion of it at their discretion, and that the effective dates of that collection would be September 1st through December 31st. This county lowered the price. Did they lower the? $0.04 and actually 8 cents, because the fact that there are many transient populations, people who do not live in the county, and therefore the decision was acknowledge that there will be excess receipts, but to take those receipts and to plow it into that the value of the holiday is $1.2 million. That is being used to reduce the levy required to be paid for by county taxpayers, so that all county taxpayers at the end receive the benefit of that collection. Then on the top of the stack is sales taxes. Sales tax as being the single largest revenue source for the county, estimated in 23 at $37 million. $37 million on a $122 million budget. So you can see it's very significant in the overall ability for the county to be revenue neutral or to be revenue stable. And we are also, as we look at that number, you have to wonder what will happen in 23. Is this nation and this region going to go into a recession? And therefore, is discretionary spending perhaps going to be limited as the Fed continues to increase the prime rate, and by extension, increasing unemployment levels, thereby driving down possibly the expenditure within the discretionary mode. So we are taking a rather conservative approach, saying that we're not going to really increase at all our sales tax collections for next year, but we did increase the fund balance. So again, this next chart, property tax levy has remained the same. There's been adjustments in the revenues that are received for each department, be it grants or be it fee structures. There was a consistency in fund balance until this year where we had the increase. These are numbers. Obviously, we had a COVID year. Here to our overall numbers with a large increase in sales tax. But now, with the onslaught of potential recession, we're not going to have such a large increase from one fiscal year to the next. From a historical standpoint, last time we can have a similar economic occurrence was back in the 08-09 national crash. At that time, this was approximately 10% of its sales tax in one single year. So as you can see, if we're projecting $37 million, but we lose a 10% factor because of the budget would be out of balance, we would need to make adjustments. So We're being very conservative on that. And I wish my crystal ball was that clear in order to understand where it's going to go. But interestingly enough, the sales tax for us has grown every year. And what I'd like to get further in the weeds, this to me is very extraordinary. If you go back to, if you know what a NASIC code is, it's a means to sort sales tax by collection within movies. And you see number 12, that's internet purchases. Only $14 million on an annual basis back at that period. And if you flip over, now look at it. It's gone from 14 million to $68 million. This county does not have a large mall yet. It appears we're still buying our sneakers and we're still buying our blue jeans, but we're doing so by going online. And with that, the sales tax collection has increased because of a recent court decision that then provides the sales tax to be collected at the point of delivery, not the point of distribution. So that has made a very, very large difference in our sales tax collection and has been part of the reason why we've been able to keep the levy low and flat for that 4-year period. If you look at it one more way, the top 5, again, going from 17 to 22, the top 5 have traditionally been the same top 5. They may have moved, one may become 2 the next year, but now that one who used to be number 12 is now within the top 5. And we have to wonder at what point does that reach a cap or collection? And we're not going to be able to be bailed out by sales tax increases from one fiscal year to the next. Then moving into, on the expense side of the budget, getting back to my opening comments about the size of the increase in budget from 117 million to 122 million, half of that increase is just in the solid waste operations. It's up $2.6 million as the tonnage that we receive at our 4 transfer stations has continued to skyrocket every year. I think we're now in the, Scott, help me, 80,000 tons per year. Is that a accurate number, Paul? Yeah. Yes. 5 years ago it was probably 30,000. So our collection of garbage in our 4 transfer stations has really skyrocketed. That municipal solid waste that has to be transported over to what's called the landfill Seneca Meadows, a round trip about 300 miles. The county has to pay for that distribution. So with the expense increase, there's also a revenue increase, but there is still a gap. The operations still is in a deficit somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000 per year. The next increase, and this is somewhat of an annual, is the cost of healthcare. This is also up probably a little bit more than normal. 2 things driving that expense increase would be just the normal activity within the healthcare industry, but also for the fact that from a fiscal year, this budget is adding about 20 full-time positions over what was carried the previous year. So that by itself is going to raise the healthcare cost as those new employees come on the payroll. Then lastly, just kind of a summary of all of the increases of that on that page 1. So you have personnel services. That's so again. Your 20+ people, and then you have the normal increase for collective bargaining contracts that pretty much makes up the balance of that amount. Oops, sorry. There is the solid waste amount of 2.6, the healthcare that I mentioned. Of course, when payroll goes up, so does Social Security, Human Services, Transportation, our bus system that we have more and 7 routes or 9 routes?
9 and
Nine.
and a shuttle.
9 routes in a shuttle, so we do that under contract, but again, because of diesel costs and payroll for the contracted agency, there's a large increase in that budget, and then some perhaps more traditional increases, but large ones in the remaining 2 departments. So the good news story, I guess, we have a budget, again, with a flat property tax. So this is year 4. Now what we're trying to do, we're trying to look into the future. We're trying to stabilize and not increase the property tax to the citizens. So we began to do a series of projections, both on the expense side and the revenue side. And if we're coming off of recession for one fiscal year to the next, I probably can't raise the sales tax estimate, which would help overall expenses. Because it takes a year or 2 for the bottom to hit, and then we begin to climb back out again, returning to whatever the new normal will be at that time. The goal would be also to maintain the fund balance contribution to the equation. And then we did an estimate as best we could of what our internal fees and grants would be. And at the top, what we get is the variances, the deltas. What would we be short in a fiscal year? So what you see here, and I apologize for the coloring, that's why it's better to have your hard copy. The first year when that deficit occurs is a deficit that we really anticipated a few years ago, because every economy goes in cycles. There's boom, maybe not boom bust, but there's always going to be ups and downs. And when you have sales tax at that level and that percentage of your budget, going back to the 08-09 crash, if you're going to lose 10%, $3.7 million, you got to have a backup plan, because if you don't, then that number at the bottom is going to have to increase. So this board a few years ago created a sales tax reserve fund for the very purpose of having a backup plan, a second source of income, if you will, for the inevitable downtime of an economy. So that first year, and then followed by the second year, the goal would be to dip into the reserve fund, thereby relieving the property tax from having to increase. And that is going on for, we predict, for a 5-year period. When you get up to the extreme years, if the sales tax has not been able to rebound back to pre-recession levels, we end up with other gaps, particularly in 27. The brown at the top there is meant to illustrate the potential, and please put that in capital letters, of the introduction of the new revenue source, which we have defined as a hotel occupancy. If that were to go into effect, we would be able to continue with the 0 increase in the property tax. If this number, though, goes up higher than the estimates, the deficits will not occur, and we would not need to have alternative sources. My crystal ball isn't that clear. So the question comes down to, what is a hotel occupancy fee? There are 6 counties in the state that do not have a fee today. Every other county in the state has an occupancy. Then actually there's multiple fees, depending on where you are. I was at Lake George this summer, and when I checked out, there was 2 occupancy fees. The initial research that we have done, and this is, we've only begun to scratch the surface of this. The whole industry now of Airbnb and VRBO, et cetera, short-term rentals, is a new phenomenon in the market. And the research that we have done is the value of those sales on an annual basis in Greene County is about $100 million. Well, $100 million of room sales on an annual basis, basically on the explosion of the Airbnb industry, the phenomenon, call it what you will. So the question comes down to, should that be a source of additional revenue that can be used to defray any increase in the property tax? Notice as well, we're talking about this 5 years out. In my parlance, in local government, 5 years, I consider tomorrow. The ability to create such a tax would require not only this board passing a resolution, but also seeking the New York State Legislature to approve that request. That is not guaranteed. Who knows what's going to happen in Albany at any given time. But the fact that there are only 6 counties now that don't have a hotel fee, I would perhaps venture to guess that it may not be that difficult for us, or it might. They may say no. They may say no the first year. They may say no the second year. They may say no forever. What we don't know is what could it churn? How many rooms are there? What are the stays? What are the occupancy rates? What are the daily fees? What's the RevPAR? RevPAR being a terminology that is the average room rate in any of our facilities. There is so much research that has to be compiled here and then evaluated, because being that far away, other factors could push that or relieve us of that necessity. But I think in order to have a decision to be made, we need the data, we need to understand, and we also need to understand the impact that that would have on the owner of that facility. I do not say that lightly. We understand the impact. Is it a revenue, though, that it's not being paid for by the people who paid $27 million for the last 4 years? It's the similar rationale that was used not to embrace the gasoline tax holiday, because we feel much of the gasoline is purchased by non-county residents. If you look at the Thruway rest stop in New Baltimore, a rest stop that services both northbound and southbound traffic, that is the #1 gas station on the entire Thruway system. And I venture to say, not a county resident buys their gas. So the whole concept here is, should we rely on non-residents to have this new fee if we even go through the exercise of creating the fee? In the meantime, as I said, considerable research has to be done. Considerable dialogue has to be made with the community. This is not being considered in a vacuum. And at the end of the day, I can't tell you whether we would have or we would not have. The question is, what is it worth? How much could it be? How fine-tuned can it be? It is not a fee that goes on the total expenses that may be charged within a facility. If you have entertainment, if you have food and beverage, those types of things, those items would not be taxed. It would just be the value of the room. And we have no idea how many rooms we have. What is the average rate per night? What is the average occupancy per year? Seasonal fluxes, et cetera. So we have a lot of research to do if we want to go down this road. Again, I've gotten into a lot of that information, and I just want to see if I've missed a point. I guess the bottom point is the biggest one. Subject to further discussion. I anticipate considerable discussion. And lastly is a summation. fourth year in a row that the county levy has not been increased, with the goal being able to continue that flat tax for a number of years. However, with the potential of a national recession being in the play, the expense increases, I mentioned at the earlier session, that the level of the expense increase this year seems to be unusually high, but when you go back to the fact that one item alone is half the increase of solid waste, I would not anticipate that type of an increase again next year. And then again, with the potential in the future for the occupancy fee. Mr. Chairman, that brings up the majority of my comments, and at that point, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, thank you for that presentation. All right, and as I said, this is a public hearing. And I would ask that if you would like to speak, please come down to the podium and speak into the microphone. And state your name so we can get your name on the record. There's also a sign-up sheet on the podium, if you would please fill in that information for us. And I would also ask, when you're recognized, please state for the record which part of the tentative budget you wish to speak to. This is a public hearing. It's not a question and answer period. It is for the legislature to hear comments from the public with regards to this tentative budget. However, if there are some questions that we may answer, we'll try to answer them for you. And with that, we'll start the hearing. Is there anyone here this evening who wishes to be heard with regards to the tentative budget for Green County for the year 2023?
Make sure it's on. What's on?
Can I speak to that?
Yeah, it's right, Mike.
Absolutely.
With my glasses, sorry.
Give us your name and which section of the budget you'd like to speak.
My name is Rosemary Lewis, and I would like to speak to the HOF part of the budget. Obviously, my name is Rosemary Lewis. My family owns and operates Mountains Brookside in Greenville. My son is in the audience. He is 5th generation, and we are serving 5th generation guests. In the day, there were close to 100 boarding houses in Greenville alone. Today, we are down to below 3 survivors on the island. Sunny Hill has been in business for 102 years. We have been in business for 101, and Pine Lake Manor 99 years. I spent most of last night and all of today thinking about what I would say tonight. I tried to crunch some imaginary numbers on what the HOF would cost us. Last year, unbeknownst to us, inflation, we only raised our rates 3%. Our food costs were up this summer over 11%. You do the math. Minimum wage is slated to be increased $1 an hour in January. Our payroll will increase next summer by a minimum of $25,000 just for our payroll. What will this hotel occupancy fee cost us? Most likely our business. We cannot survive increases of this magnitude in food, minimum wage, and an additional tax. We will be left with 2 options, neither of which will be advantageous to the county. Option 1, we will be forced to close our business, reduce the number of buildings on the property, which will result in 0 sales tax collected by the county, as well as a reduction in our property taxes. Option 2 would be to sell. The only organizations currently buying these types of businesses are religious organizations. Again, it's a lose-lose for the county, as they pay no sales tax. Nor do they pay property tax revenue in the area, and we are obese and industries of this type. But please don't make the surviving resorts of Green County a casualty of your need to increase the coffers. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who would like to speak this evening?
glasses off. Happens when you get old. Go from one pair to the other. I'm sorry, I take the glasses off. Go from, as we get old, we have a tendency to adjust our eyesight. So I want to talk about fund balance. And all the information in financial data I have looked at comes from your annual financial statements, your audited financial statements, and the New York State Comptroller's Office. These numbers are from those sources, not made up, but given to this board by your outside auditors. The first question, or the first thing I want to say is, has any member of this legislative body gone through your audited financial statements or your annual financial report to the state legislature? You don't need to answer, just a remark. So what is a fund balance? As Mr. Grover has indicated, it's simply you have more revenue than expenses, or more expenses than revenue. Obviously, one is a positive fund balance, the other is a negative fund balance. For Greene County, years 2017 through 2021, the total fund balance revenue surplus increased by $21,167,398. More revenue than expenses. The final 2021 audited financial statement, and this is a quote: the final 2021 budgeted planned on a reduction in the general fund balance of $7,485,511. However, the actual operating surplus of $9,504,947, which means that your revenue exceeded your expenses by $9,504,947, which resulted in a budget surplus of $16,990,450. Actual charges to appropriations, that is the amount that you have budgeted in your expenses, for $9,545,944, less than what you budgeted. The Greene County fund balance, this is the general fund. I'm not talking about the highway fund or the machinery fund. In 2021, the fund balance right now is $52,130,426. In 2020, it was $40,018,193. In 2019, it was $38,199,389. In 2018, it was $34,419,844. And in 2017, the fund balance was $30,964,028. So from the year 2021 through 2019, Your fund balance has increased $21,166,398. And that information came from Open Books, New York State Comptroller's Office, and your audited financial statements. So, included in fund balance, so that you know what I'm talking about, is an assigned appropriated fund balance. Your assigned unappropriated, which you haven't appropriated. Other assigned and unassigned fund balance, which means you haven't assigned it, right? I'll tell you the components. Accounts 806 and 807, 913, 914, 915, and 917. So those are your New York State. Come look at those. This is county law 355G, contents of tentative budget. A statement of the fund balance for each fund estimated to be on hand at the close of the current fiscal year, together with a breakdown of such fund balances estimated for encumbrances, amounts appropriated for the ensuing fiscal year's budget, amounts reserved for stated purposes pursuant to law, including reserve funds established pursuant to the general municipal law, and the remaining estimated, unappropriated, unreserved fund balance for each fund, provided for the remaining estimate. So what does that mean? It means you have made a statement of fund balances at a budget hearing. Now, your unappropriated reserve, which you're allowed to have, I'm not saying that's nothing wrong with it. The unappropriated, unreserved fund balance for each fund shall not exceed a reasonable amount. Considered with prudent budgeting practices necessary to ensure the orderly operation of county government and the continued provision of services. Take into account factors including size of the fund, cash flows, and revenues. There are other statements that I could read I have here, but these are all statements made from your audited financial statements. So the question comes up, what is an unreasonable amount, or a reasonable amount, a reasonable amount to keep in your fund balance? What's a reasonable amount? Well, the reasonable amount is, according to the government accounting office, recommended at a minimum that the general purpose governments, regardless of size, maintain unrestricted budgetary fund balances in their general fund of no less than 2 months of regular general fund operating revenues or regular general fund operating expenses. So you would need you have 31 million right now, $349,678 in fund balance. The other amounts you have either restricted or unrestricted. So the general fund, if you look at your budget for 2 months, you would need to have on hand $14,776 and 060. You have $31,349 in your fund balance. So what does that mean? Does it mean that you're ultra conservative? I mean, why would you not be conservative? That's a good thing. Nothing wrong with watching what you spend. Nothing wrong with that. What is wrong is you have so much money in your fund balance that you could reduce your appropriations for this year by another $2 to $3 million, which would affect the county tax rate for each town. Although based on the equalization rate, it may not lower the percent, but the percent that the town would pay, each person in that town would pay, may be less than what they paid last year. This is a statement of revenue expenditures, encumbrances, and change in fund balance for the year ended December 31st, 2021. And this comes from your audited financial statement. Right now, you began the year with the original budget was $36,625,156. Your final budget was $35,139,968. And your actual budget, your actual amount that you spent and received into, your fund balance is now $52,130,426. Now, how can you check that? I mean, don't believe me. Go to the treasurer's office. Ask him how much he has in his cash account. Usually, whatever he has in his cash account is fairly similar to what you see in your fund balance account. So, what I'm trying to impress upon you is that for the past 5 years, you've done a great job of holding the tax rate to no increase, but you did a lousy job of reducing the tax rate when you have had the opportunity to do so. You have never used in those 5 years any of the money that you appropriated fund balance for actual expenses. So who's making money? Not your money. It's everybody in the county's money. It's taxpayers' money. It's money that belongs to them, not to you. Now, obviously, I do agree with Mr. Grogan that you need to put aside money. You need to make sure that you have enough money available so you don't run into issues that had happened back when I was a county legislator, when we had no fund balance. So what I'm asking you to do tonight, go back, talk, and get a handle on what you can do to reduce the total appropriations for the budget. Now, I know, and I appreciate, and I thank you for the fact that the legislature allocated to all 14 towns $100,000 out of the ARPA monies. That's the American Rescue Plan. And I think that was great. I mean, you should be commended for that. Of course, the county has still then 2024 to use all the money. Now, we talk about a stabilization fund, but a stabilization fund has to, if you're going to set up a stabilization fund, you must do that by resolution. And I may be wrong, but that requires a permissive referendum. So if you want to say, I have a sales tax stabilization fund, you don't have it. There's nothing in your budget, it shows zero. So I ask you, get in touch with the county treasurer, county administrator, budget officer, and sit down and have a real hard talk about this budget and the amount in fund balance. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Lisa Galena from Philanthropic Extension. I'm here with my colleague Becky this year.
I will be using microphone. I'm not exactly sure this is my first rodeo with your budget process, as to which part I'm speaking on. So it's in regard to our contractual agreement for our DSS parenting programs, education. Each year, we're serving 50 to 80 families in Boone County. 70% of those cases that come to us convert to the cases we serve. They come to us through DSS, through referrals. And those who don't work with us, 90% of the ones who choose not to work with us, over 30% don't end up converting. 90% of that 30% choose not to work with any other programs. Their families are often disengaged completely. For those who do engage, we work with families with their children from prenatal to age 19, to look at the entire family system. Every family that workers receives our services through referral organizations within the family that you support, as well as other resources and nonprofits who engage them. 90% of our program participants report an improvement in their parenting skills after participation, which is measured by surveys and educator observation, as well as not hitting other systems which constrain our budget, such as going back through the CPS system or going into the payment system. So it's a great program that both is prevention and intervention, and we've been doing this for over 20 years, and we hope to continue to do so to support and build resiliency for our families. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I took the sign-in sheet. I wanted to make sure nobody talked. I just need to sign. Sorry about that, gentlemen and ladies.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the tentative 2023 budget for the county? Well, legislative at this time. So one last time, is there anyone here this evening who wishes to be heard with regards to the tentative budget for the Green County for the year 2023? Hearing no one, thank everyone for attending this public hearing, and I will declare this public hearing closed. Thank you.